And those two things, so Bitcoin is this private, secure payments rail, and Bitcoin as this speculative commodity, like gold, as many would say, may seem to be compatible with each other, but I would argue that they're in fact not compatible. What we've seen is that speculation on the price of Bitcoin and attempts to get as many Bitcoins as possible have created not this system of mutually voluntaristic, shared computing, but instead a consolidation and industrialization of Bitcoin miners. I mean, they talk about...
Lana, can I break in there? Because this
please.
is quite complicated stuff. And I just want to go back to Michael, because Michael was saying that in Africa, he is seeing people use it as a method of exchange across borders, and it's a convenient way to do that. And yet we're hearing from Lana there, Michael, that it's become something people speculate in to make a profit as if it were a commodity. Do you see a contradiction there?
No, I think there's no problem. It can be both. It can be a commodity that has value, but then because you can exchange it, it can also sort of act like money. So I don't think there's any reason why it can be both. And if you look at what people are using it, there's some people here who are using it for the speculation aspect of it as a commodity or trading it. But there are also people who are buying it the way they'd go to a bank in the traditional sense, ask to buy dollars and then use these dollars to send value to someone else. But because of the way Bitcoin works, it's much faster than that. It's more convenient than that. You don't have to go to a bank to ask for dollars. You can just buy these things called Bitcoin from an online agent. Remember I was telling you about how earlier M-Pesa, you walk to an M-Pesa agent on a physical space, but with Bitcoin you just get in touch with an agent online. They send you these things called Bitcoins, and you can use these Bitcoins to send them to someone you're buying something from.
Yeah, but Michael, you give them dollars or cash. You give them an established currency to get those Bitcoins, right?
Yes. Ideally, it's as if you're exchanging your traditional money for like Kenyan currency for dollars. But in this case, you're exchanging M-Pesa, for example, for this thing called Bitcoin, whatever you call it, whether it's a commodity or a currency or whatever. Yeah, but it has value and you can transmit it to someone else.
But I just want to go to, I know, Dave Birch, I know you're trying to come in, but just to go to Brett, because you told me earlier you bought a pizza with Bitcoin the other day. So presumably that pizza supplier is making Bitcoins and trading in Bitcoins, and maybe paying his suppliers in Bitcoins. So does that mean there's a whole little tiny bit of the economy, a pizza-sized, restaurant-sized bit of the economy, that is out of control of the government, and that their power to control the money supply is dented to the extent that that restaurant is active?
Not really, no. I mean, I think the key thing to think about Bitcoin is like it hypothetically could be a currency system. It's basically a electronic infrastructure that you could implement a currency system on. But the key thing about a currency is that we use it to value all other goods in an economy, right? So you could be, coffees to your Uber ride to whatever. Bitcoin right now is actually perceived as being just another commodity in a, for example, dollar-denominated economy. So when people say, for example, you hear these slightly ridiculous things online, people say, oh, the dollar is depreciating relative to Bitcoin because the price of Bitcoin is going up. It's like saying the dollar is depreciating to Beyonce tickets because they're limited edition and their price is rising. It's just another commodity.
Okay, but Dave Birch, I mean, the future may not be Bitcoins. It may be another variant of this that is more successful and becomes an effective global currency, right?
Well, I would say that, the bumper sticker version of it would be the future of money isn't Bitcoin, but the future of Bitcoin isn't money. So in other words, I don't think Bitcoin's money. And actually a US court ruled this yesterday, so I feel I can say it. Bitcoin isn't money. It's a funny kind of digital commodity. It's also not a terribly good payment system. However, the technology which sits underneath it, Craig Wright, the Australian who was outed as the supposed Satoshi Nakamoto, in one of his last...
The founder of... the creator of Bitcoin.
The creator of Bitcoin. I have no comment about whether he was or was not, but one of his last blog posts before it all went offline, he said, and I thought this is very profound, he said the way to see Bitcoin is a global shared security system. It's a way of making things secure so you don't have to trust anybody in particular to maintain that security. And that's the potential foundation of new ways of doing things, new processes, new business, new markets. I buy into
and a new currency.
Whether it's a new currency or not, I personally think it's slightly unlikely because I suspect the future of currencies is more related to the communities that use them. It's more local, but local in the physical and virtual sense.
So is there anyone here who thinks that a Bitcoin-type thing could become a currency?
It would be a currency if you actually priced goods in it exclusively.
Well, that pizza you bought was.
Yeah, but in reality, what they're doing is that they buy their supplies with British pounds, and then they convert it via the market value of Bitcoin for British pounds as well, and they work out an equivalence. So I like the fact, I use Bitcoin partly because it's the one current alternative to the bank payment system, and I like the fact that there's an alternative, but I think it's a bit misleading to say it actually behaves like a currency system. It's essentially, it's a digital token that you can transfer via a collectively maintained digital ledger. And as Dave mentions, there's many things you can transfer via collectively maintained digital ledger, but it forms but one part of a potential future.
If you conduct the thought experiment about what might replace the current, so for example, here's an easy way to frame the argument. We all think the euro's a bit silly because it makes no sense to have Germany and Greece in the same currency union. It doesn't make any sense because they have different economies and blah, blah, blah. By the same token, it doesn't make any sense to have London and Middlesbrough in the same currency system because they have completely...
That's a town in the north of England.
It's a town in the north of England. So if you construct the thought experiment and say, let's imagine that we decided we were going to have London money and take London out of the sterling zone because it distorts sterling so much. What would that money look like? My argument is it would look more like M-Pesa than it looks like Bitcoin. I genuinely think that. So the idea that you would have somebody who manages and controls it, but with privacy built in, seems to me much more plausible than it would be a cryptocurrency.
And Michael, you'd go along with that, right?
First of all, I think Bart said earlier that Bitcoin is not a good payment system. And I think that's debatable because that really depends on what country you're from. There was a report that came out just the other day from Citibank that said emerging countries suffer from poor infrastructure for payments. And that's something we've observed here in Kenya where if you're trying to send value from Kenya to another country, it's really, really, really difficult. I have to walk to my bank to get dollars, and then it takes like 3 days. And you can imagine this at a peer level if someone is trying to send like 1,000 Kenya shillings or a really small amount. And the people who are using this for payments right now are confirming that there is a problem sending value from Kenya to other places. Like there's a problem with the payments infrastructure.
But the cost of Bitcoin, if you look just at this morning's, I don't know the exact figure right now, but as of this morning, the mining take on Bitcoin was about 1.35, 1.4%. The idea that Bitcoin is cheap or is just wrong is that, the costs are hidden at the moment because they're given away as rewards.
Right, you're now talking about miners. Lana, before
and
you
that's also, you're talking about mining costs, but for the most part, if you're trying to use Bitcoin in everyday life, you're using Bitcoin ATMs, Bitcoin debit cards, a variety of Bitcoin intermediaries, all of which also take a take. So what has wound up happening, as far as I can tell, is that many of the attributes and the costs of the pre-existing payment system have just been rebuilt and on top of Bitcoin.
Onto Bitcoin. Brett, can you explain the mining side of? Because we've heard reference to this word mining Bitcoins. What does that mean?
The existing bank payment system, when you're making a payment, if you're getting the banks to edit those ledgers for you, essentially they have, you could imagine there being sort of salaried employees who do it for you, right? Who essentially process the payments. The best way to think about the miners are they're like a decentralized group of techno clerks who change the ledger for you in the Bitcoin system and attribute your money to a new account. So move it from your account to somebody else. And
I got the impression earlier that when someone does that, they make more Bitcoins. Is that correct?
Yeah, what the way it works in the existing bank system, there's a distinction between who issues the money and how the money gets issued, and then how you move it around. Which is called, so the issuance process happens via the credit creation of money process, or what's called fractional reserve banking. And then there's a payment system that moves that money around between accounts. In the Bitcoin system, they fuse those things into one, where the reward for maintaining the payment system is you get issued new money.
Yes.
And that's the clever trick that they get it to be self-sustaining.
And it creates more money.
Yeah. And basically what that entails is that
for a while.
If you're the person who manages to maintain the ledger, you get to write in a new amount of money for yourself.
Okay, and sorry, what was your point, Dave?
Well, at some point in the not too distant future, in global terms, all of the Bitcoins will have been mined. So then, if you want people to process these transactions, you'll have to pay them a transaction fee because they won't be getting the mining reward. And my point is that transaction fee does not make Bitcoin instant, cheap or free. It isn't. That's not to say other people won't come up with other systems that might. But
Michael?
Yeah, I'll just add that maybe that shows how poor the infrastructure here is if people are willing to pay the mining cost. I guess we'd have to see how that evolves.
I agree with that.
Yes, I think we all got that point that you're saying that everyone's saying Bitcoin's not very good, but if it's what you compare it to, and if in Kenya you can't
That's
get
a
your
fair
money,
point,
you
yeah.
can't get your money out easily, it may be better. Yeah.
Can I make a point on this concept of the future of money? And when people are talking about the future of money, they're essentially talking about different elements of monetary systems that you can change. A large part of what's called the future of money in mainstream circles is how do you change the existing way we interact with the bank database systems, whether it's like I'm using my fingerprint or my facial recognition or my mobile phone, whatever.
Yeah.
Where Bitcoin hits is changing the power dynamics of who gets to control the database systems. That's what essentially all it does. But there's many other alternative money forms which change different elements. So, for example, you look at this, there are systems that change who gets to issue the money. So, like mutual credit systems, you can change what the money is redeemable for. So, for example, local currency systems like the Brixton pound, which I use, is a redeemability change to money. You can only use it in certain things. You can change the politics of the financial institutions that dominate the actual payments process, and that's what financial reform movements are about.
And do you feel, Brett, I mean, I think given the potential variety of communities that could become issuers because the technology is available to all of them, I have a feeling that the idea that communities that issue currencies that are embedded with certain values of those communities will gain traction. So people will opt into the communities they want to belong to through the money, and the transaction costs within those communities will be minimised through the use of these systems, whereas the transaction costs between them will potentially go up.
Yeah, but I think I've asked this question before, and it's still bothering me because I did economics at school, and I thought I was told at that time that governments want to control the money supply. It's a big power, and they try to do that, and it's an important thing for them. And we've just seen it with this post-Brexit situation. It made a difference when the governor of the Bank of England comes up and says things about the money supply. It sort of matters. So if there are all these local currency unions and whatever, doesn't that undermine that government power?
I think the long-term history of the interrelationship between technology and money is a steady history of decentralisation. And right now we're living in the sort of post-industrial revolution settlement between sovereign and city, which, as Brett said, granted the money creation power to commercial banks, but the regulatory power was kept centrally. That's not a law of physics. That just happens to be the arrangement.
That's the settlement we have now. I see.
And if it turns out that people want democratic control but of different kinds of money, I think we should be open to those. Look, if we'd have been sitting in this studio 400 years ago complaining about the way money worked, look, we have all these silver coins, they're all clipped, there's not enough in circulation, we're moving from feudalism to a money-wage economy and there isn't enough money to pay the wages, blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do? None of us would have thought there's going to be a Bank of England and a gold standard, and we wouldn't have seen it coming. And I feel we're in that same situation.
No, I do take the point that one of the things reading
there's
all
going
about
to be
this,
change.
Yeah, what reading all about this is this whole idea of money is much less constant than one might imagine. And I mean, I'm just going to read since you sort of set it up. Really, the Travels of Marco Polo. So this is 1300, and he was in China. And he's saying this: all these pieces of paper. He said we saw paper being used as money. Totally unfamiliar with the idea.
Unknown in the
West. All these pieces of paper are issued with as much solemnity or authority as if they were pure gold or silver, and everyone takes them readily. For wherever a person may go throughout the great Khan dominions, he'll find these pieces of paper and will be able to transact all sales and purchases of goods by means of them, just as if they were pure gold. And there was Marco Polo, absolutely astounded.
And the Pax Khan, because that drove up the amount of commerce inside the Khan's empire, because it made trading easier, it had immediate economic benefit to the. Of course, he had a slightly more effective acceptance policy, which is if you didn't accept the paper money, he would kill you. But I mean, at least you knew where you stood.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with Lana, and then we'll go to Michael on this idea, which I must admit is news to me, that you can have all sorts of local currencies, different monetary arrangements, different ways of creating money, digital, cash, whatever, and that in the future that may well be the way we go, that there will be less unified money systems. True, Lana?
Yeah, I actually think, even though I love local currencies and I think they're fascinating, I actually think that where I'm really watching